Hello, 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 and welcome back to Apex to Oval. It's the ninth episode of season 2. I am Jack. Alex is gone. He's getting his revenge for me leaving him for Iceland over the summer. And this week, we are going to be talking about F1, NASCAR, an IndyCar driver spotlight, and a little bit of F1 Academy. We don't have much in the way of endurance racing or MotoGP news this week, but that's probably not surprising because it's mostly Alex that watches those series. Before we start, drop a 5-star review, subscribe, like, share if you enjoy the podcast, and as always, keep an eye out for Alex's content, whether he's writing articles, whether he's posting. He's really active in the content game. With that said, getting straight into the F1 stories, Oscar Piastri, man, he has had a rough go of it this season. Technically, in the 2 races this year, he has completed 0 laps. Obviously, we know in Australia, at his home race, he had a brutal wreck in a reconnaissance lap, not even the formation lap. And this time around in China, he managed to get to the grid, but they detected an electrical issue shortly after a separate, unrelated electrical issue with his teammate, and had to retire both cars. McLaren did. Piastri did get points in the sprint, so he has run laps on track and has earned points, but it's still 2 official Grand Prix and no laps to show for it, much less points, is that's tough. That's really tough. And that's definitely not how the reigning championship team wants to start the year. Speaking of not how people want to start the year, we talked about it last time around, but the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix have both officially been canceled. It's been announced by, everyone, by the official F1 accounts. And that means that we're going to have a gap. We've got Japan coming up in a couple weeks, and then we've got about a month until Miami is the next race after that. So buckle up, get interested in some other racing series. It's gonna be a while, kind of sitting on our hands with an impromptu early summer break. Maybe even a spring break. I don't really know where it fits in. And the last kind of smaller piece of news is that F1 the movie, the summer blockbuster that we've talked about a few times on the podcast. If you're into racing, you surely can't miss it. Won Best Sound at the Oscars. It was up for a few different awards. It was up for Best Picture. It was up for Visual Effects and Film Editing. And it ended up taking home Best Sound. So I believe that puts Lewis Hamilton halfway to an EGOT, to Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony. But obviously, a ton of people involved with the movie. Definitely a prelude to Apple's involvement in the broadcasting of F1, because Apple played a huge role in the production and promotion of the movie, and you can currently watch it on Apple TV, just like you can watch F1 races. But yeah, it means something that a racing movie was up for Best Picture in the first place, and it's definitely really impressive for it to come home with an award. And I would agree that I think that the sound of that movie was really impressive, even if I ended up watching it at home instead of in a theater, instead of with, Dolby, whatever Dolby version is in theaters at this point. From there, the race in China. So in the sprint, we had George Russell winning, and then the rest of the points were as follows: Charles Leclerc in second, Lewis Hamilton in third, Lando fourth, Kimi in fifth, Oscar Piastri sixth, Lawson seventh, and Oliver Bearman sneaking into last points place in eighth. Now this was another nightmare start for Kimi Antonelli. He really has yet to figure out how to start the Mercedes. I don't know if it's too much power, the time to spool up. I know in Australia he had awful wheel spin. Here he had another clunker of a start, to the point where trying to recover, he desperately caused an incident, picked up a 10-second penalty. Because of a safety car, he ended up serving that penalty during the race, which allowed him to claw up to 5th place. May have even been worse because, in a sprint, a 10-second penalty can take you all the way out of the points. But really just brutal for him again, while his teammate picks up the win. 2 Ferraris on the podium there, even though, sprint podium isn't official. is it's a great sign, and they were both in close proximity to George out front, although I think that you can really make the argument that Mercedes was managing their pace pretty well. But this was the first time that you had hints that Mercedes was pulling a little more out of the bag, and Ferrari was still able to keep up. So that was still a good sign. And of course, McLaren getting double points there is huge in the sense that they haven't really done much in the races. We talked about how Piastri hasn't run in the races. Lando Norris didn't start the Grand Prix in China. And they need everything they can get. I think right now they're holding off Haas by 1 point, despite the best efforts of Oliver Behrman carrying that team on his back. And McLaren's going to need to figure out how to not Aston Martin it, so to speak. As for the race itself, Kimi Antonelli got his maiden win in Formula One. He is the youngest ever pole sitter from the race at the Chinese Grand Prix. He is the youngest driver to lead a lap and the youngest driver to set a fastest lap, as has happened before. Those two were both at Japan last year. But this is a driver that he came here young. I mean, Alex talked about last year, expecting him to disappoint because he kind of rushed up. And at the end of the race, if you listen to the radio broadcast, Toto acknowledges that, right? I forget the exact wording, but he was listing off the things that people were saying about Kimi, of why it was a mistake to bringing him up, of why he should have started in a slower car, why any of these things should have been done differently. But no, he was the choice to fill the giant shoes of Lewis Hamilton, and clearly he has performed well up to this point. He had some missteps in his rookie season. He's clearly still showing his inexperience on track, whether it's the bad race starts, whether it's some of the desperation, like picking up a penalty in the sprint. But the raw pace is there. The racecraft is there. He is wise beyond his years in a lot of ways. And it's really impressive for him to pick up this win. Yes, it was taking advantage of issues for George Russell, but it still is a very impressive Grand Prix side of the weekend for Kimi Antonelli. Behind him was his teammate George Russell, but behind him was Lewis Hamilton, who finished ahead of Charles Leclerc after a gripping multi-lap battle between those two teammates. They kind of realized that they didn't have the pace to keep up with the Mercedes, and so they gloves off, started fighting each other, just back and forth in a way that I have been very critical early on of the racing in these new regulations. I felt like a lot of it's artificial, right? In Australia, you had George getting passed at every corner, George having a faster car by up to a second a lap, and that not mattering because George would use up his energy to get past and Charles would just use energy to go right back ahead. Whether it was Mercedes dropping the act a little and just passing them because Mercedes had a much easier time passing this time around, whether it's just the track differences allowing them to recharge better and have more battery more consistently, I don't know what it was, but the racing here at China was incredible, and the Ferrari teammates really put on a great show. As Alex said in the notes that he left for me, in all caps, Ferrari battles are saving the F1 season, and honestly, I kind of agree. That was such pure racing that Charles, who lost out in that battle, was saying on the radio how much fun he was having after losing out to Lewis and dropping behind him to fall off the podium. He was talking about how fun it was. And I know on the other side you have Max Verstappen, who's not used to being in a slow car, and because of that is complaining endlessly about this style of racing. Even though, as much as I've ragged on these regs a little bit in the early going, it's still better than DRS trains and not being able to pass. And I think that there are some things about how races were officiated in the ground effect era too, that because those cars struggled wheel to wheel, it was, if you get close enough at the apex, you could do whatever you want. And it's a tough style to watch, even if maybe it's purer racing in the eyes of Max Verstappen and others. But this really is this race at China was a tremendous wheel-to-wheel product. And I really hope it continues to look like that. Alex wanted to note as well that while Ferrari was clearly second, probably by about 0.6 per lap, he thinks that they can overtake Mercedes if their upgrades come in and work. I certainly think that they can close the gap. I think that that's the point of bringing upgrades. I think that's the point of continuing development on the car. I'm not sure about overtaking Mercedes because I am not convinced that we've seen everything Mercedes has yet. And there are a few reasons that I think that. So Mercedes in this race got faster as their stints went on. They once again did like a 40 plus lap stint on hard tires. A very long stint, pretty aggressive based on Pirelli's pre-race recommendations. But they got faster until maybe the last couple laps. Finally, they started showing some wear. And if you look at the speed data, they have like a cutoff at where like most teams, they have a pretty normal kind of distribution, where Mercedes, it's very skewed to one side, where you have slower laps, sure, but they have this hard cutoff at a certain lap time that the other teams didn't really have, where between them taking care of the tires so abnormally well and them having that kind of cliff where the lap times stop, it makes me feel like there's more in the tank that they're not taking advantage of. And we've heard talks of Mercedes using only 70% of their power, or Mercedes doing this, or Mercedes doing that. I think in this case, the wear is probably due to them running a much higher downforce setup. They were able to carry a much faster speed through the apex of the corners, but lost out on top speed relative to the Mercedes customer teams that maybe were using more of that engine power for speed on the straights, especially with China having that very long back straight, but otherwise being a very downforce heavy track. It's an interesting distinction. But I still think that even without that higher downforce package, the Mercedes car is clearly competitive with the Ferrari, even without the engine advantage. Otherwise, the gap wouldn't be as large otherwise. And there's still enough evidence to point to of Mercedes not sandbagging, because they are winning, and they are showing their speed, and they dropped the pretense of fighting in a few ways this week and just got past the Ferraris and ran away a little. But I still think that Mercedes has more up their sleeve here. Although, on the other side of that, Ferrari is increasingly confident that they will be benefiting from ADUO, the additional development and upgrade opportunities that F1 has available for struggling engine manufacturers. And because that is based on independent FIA testing and not any kind of measure of performance on track, I'm inclined to believe that the Mercedes engine on like a dyno would perform 2% better than the Ferrari, and that 2% would qualify Ferrari to bring an engine upgrade despite the freeze. Which, if they can narrow the engine gap a bit, which they've been pretty confident about being able to do, and they continue upgrading the car, which they do have a pretty aggressive upgrade plan, I am sure that we will see at least one or two Ferrari race wins this year. It won't quite be Mercedes dominates all the way. I'm just not as convinced as Alex that Ferrari will truly catch Mercedes. On the topic of Ferrari, there was a little mini controversy this week with the, they brought the Macarena wing, so to speak, but they didn't end up racing with that. They were just trying to collect more data on it. And we talked last week about my own skepticism of whether that will work as well as some fans think or not. But another upgrade that Ferrari brought was a little mini wing for the Halo, where it's meant to improve the airflow around the car for being basically just a little plastic piece that sits around the kind of middle arm of the Halo. They ran it, I believe, for the sprint, but they took it off for the race because Ferrari themselves chose to take it off despite it passing scrutineering, because they were worried about other teams questioning the legality and challenging the results after the race. And basically that decision came down to Ferrari deciding that the benefits, which would have been small, especially at this track in their minds, were not worth the headaches of dealing with protests, of dealing with fighting it in court, basically, if the other teams come after it. And so they just chose to hold off for a week. They already got tighter scrutineering, better assurances from the FIA. They will be running it in Japan and will be running it from here on out. But of course, that didn't stop a mini controversy from developing, where Ferrari fans were losing their minds about Mercedes running an illegal engine, but Ferrari isn't allowed to run this legal piece. I think that a key distinction there is that Ferrari chose not to run it despite being allowed to run it. Um, Much less obviously there's a difference between, okay, can you redevelop an engine in a week, or can you not install this tiny new piece that makes a marginal difference? And I think that the risk reward calculations there are pretty different, where Mercedes would take their interpretation of the rules to the bank, make the call that they're going to make, use the engines because those are the engines they developed. Where for Ferrari, it was clearly a pretty easy decision, where they're a comfortable second place team, to not open themselves up to any risk, to hold off on this part for a couple weeks, and to get it on at the next race, where they didn't lose out on anything. They finished third and fourth. This part alone was not going to catch them up to Mercedes. So I don't see the point of being terribly upset about it. Again, if I was really, really rooting for Ferrari above all else, which clearly I am not, although Ferrari and Mercedes are probably my favorite two teams on the grid, so I'm certainly happy with the start to this season, and I am incredibly happy for Lewis Hamilton. But if I was really pulling for Ferrari, I, as usual, feel like the rage is misdirected. I think that Ferrari has not given fans much reason to believe them over the FIA, where I would go after Ferrari for developing a subpar engine, for choosing not to run the part, for choosing not to get the advantages that they can get, rather than going after the FIA for a choice that Ferrari made in this specific case. Now, for a few more odds and ends on the Chinese Grand Prix, Williams once again had great race starts. They're rocketing off the line with Mercedes engines. For those that still attribute the engine differences to the race starts, I think that if you look at Williams each week, they're a pretty good example that it's the drivers and the teams more so than the engines, even though the Ferrari engine is designed with the smaller turbo to try to improve the race starts. Clearly, it's not something that's built into the cars. Once again, it's not like Ferrari were lapping the field in race starts, even though they once again had strong starts, and Mercedes once again struggled off the line to an extent. Obviously, in the sprint, to more of an extent, Kimi's race, he still finished fifth, but his race was basically tanked by his start. Other odds and ends, there were a lot of retirements in this race, to the point where Cadillac was almost thinking about points. Both Cadillacs finished the race, even if they were shedding parts. And they spun that race finish into like really impressive positions for the Cadillac team. They finished 13th and 15th because there were only 15 cars on track at the end. Notably not on track were the Red Bulls. Was the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. Isaac Hadjar did, in fact, finish in 8th, getting points. But Max Verstappen DNF'd. The Aston Martins both DNF'd, although Fernando did make it all the way to lap 35, which is impressive, especially because if you look at the onboard, he is vibrating like crazy. The reports of potential nerve damage do not seem to be unfounded. And in response to the car trying to kill him, all of Fernando's fans online are trying to kill him right now. There are a bunch of very creative videos and scenarios talking about how he's going to die in the car, and how their fans like cheering for that to save his legacy, and bonkers stuff like that. Which, if that's how they want to be, great. I personally would like to see one of the great drivers and one of the fun personalities on the grid just stick around until this car is a little more competitive. I still don't understand how this went so wrong so fast for Aston Martin. They came in as, a higher odds than the Ferraris to win the championship. Fernando did when we first looked at the odds, and can anyone believe that was ever true just 2 races into the season? Like it's mind-blowing how bad it got for them when people were very impressed coming in. And my last note on the race itself was the driver of the day voting. So Kimi Antonelli predictably won it. He was 1 lap away from a Grand Slam of, pole, lead every lap, win. The fastest lap. And he got 23% of the vote. Right behind him was Lewis Hamilton with 22%. Obviously, first podium for Ferrari. A really great race, great battle with his teammate, actual scenes on track. Very deserving vote there. Franco Colapinto had a pretty strong race. He still is underperforming his teammate pretty comfortably, but he does have one of the most rabid fan bases out there, so it's understandable that he would get 11% of the vote. Ollie Behrman, a well-deserved 10%, was the best of the rest, finished 5th in this race. But then, somehow, 5th place was Max Verstappen with 7% of the vote. And I don't know how that's justifiable. He did not have a particularly good race. He did not qualify particularly well. Gasly beat Max 4-0 on the weekend. But Max didn't even finish the race. Like, I really don't understand this one. And I have not found any kind of an explanation for it. But with Kimi winning driver of the day, this is a great time to highlight the country of Italy. In sports right now, Italy is, they're surging. Kimi won the race, won the pole, won the driver of the day award with the fans. Ferrari is 3rd and 4th, is clearly the second best team on the grid with a fighting shot at wins this year, and with a clear path, if they can get ADUO and can improve their engine, a clear path toward being very strong in these regulations in general. In the Winter Olympics, they obviously hosted, and they had a very strong showing as far as Italy is concerned in the Winter Olympics, as you would expect for a host country, but still, it's impressive. The World Baseball Classic, Italy actually just got eliminated, losing out to Venezuela in the semifinal, but they made it to the semifinal undefeated. Team Italy did, including beating the United States, including going undefeated up until they got eliminated in the semifinal. And a really strong underdog showing there. And obviously, in tennis, Jannik Sinner has been, one of the two kind of unbeatable guys at the top of tennis for a bit now. But Italy is taken over sports. It's interesting to see, and congrats to them. So, our picks for the week: Alex picked Lewis, who finished P3. I picked George, who finished P2. Neither of us picked Kimi, who won. I'm kind of fine with that. I think Alex is very happy with his Lewis pick, finally beating Charles in the race, and really earned it too. It wasn't a strategy difference. They really raced it out. And Lewis clearly is revitalized in these regs. He's not washed. Our GOAT is not washed. And Alex is rolling with Lewis again going into Japan. While I will roll with George Russell again, because Mercedes is fastest, and as impressive as Kimi was in the race here, his starts are still too shaky. He was reliant on George having issues where if I got to pick one, I'm going to pick George until proven otherwise. Our main story, besides the race recaps for F1, is wondering if the race starts still need a revamp. Now, this is one where I really wish Alex was here to kind of debate with, because in my opinion, yes, but not as much as I would have said maybe in the preseason. And even in the preseason, I wasn't totally on the, it needs a full revamp side, because I firmly believe Ferrari brought this up like a year ago to the teams. They sacrificed in their engine design to be able to make the restart procedure, and because of that, they deserve the advantage that they get from the restart. To an extent, I think that the design of the engines in general do necessitate a bit of a longer warm-up sequence. I think that the 5 seconds accomplishes that pretty well, that we already have. I think that the really short lights out in the first race was problematic, but in this race, it was not nearly as short, and was not nearly as problematic. There's still drivers that are struggling with it, especially with the battery power, whether the battery's charged or not, whether that's too much power and they wheel spin, how they manage any of that. But I think that there are places where it can be slightly improved, maybe a little bit longer of a period before the race start, because I am not in the cars. I don't see how they're exactly warming up, so I would default to the drivers on that. but they're certainly not as dangerous as some are making it out to be. They are certainly not this sore spot that really needs to be corrected in the way that I think a lot of people are acting. And I think that just because one team seems to have an advantage in the race start, in the eyes of many, in Ferrari, does not mean inherently that it needs to be fixed. I think that that's a very problematic mindset in F1 in general, is that if this team is good, that means that they are illegal and they must be stopped. And this is a series that's about innovation, that's about developing the best piece of technology and getting the best driver to win in it. And you can't outlaw technology constantly or like claim that anything good is illegal when that's the entire purpose of the sport. So the fact that Ferrari noticed something, outdeveloped the other teams at this specific thing, does not then mean that that advantage needs to be neutralized just because the other teams didn't do it. It's the point of the sport. And yet that's the kind of culture that F1 has been for a long time now. I mean, Toto and Horner were, slapping each other for the longest time. There are many reasons that Christian Horner got the Karen Horner nickname. And all the teams will all do it to each other. And I think that, I hope that maybe they get minor tweaks, but they certainly don't need some kind of a revamp, as some still seem to believe.
Is this working? Jimmy's mom! Anyway, I found a mic in the depths of TARDIS, so I'm going to give my input on the whole race start thing because Jack had a phone by himself and I feel bad. So, the race starts aren't dangerous. They're just a product of what was sacrificed when most of the engine manufacturers made their engines. It was brought up a year ago, like Jack said, by Fred Vasseur and Ferrari, that the race starts would have issues with the current engine regs. Ferrari decided to sacrifice pure power in take 4 race restarts and race starts. That was something they sacrificed. They sacrificed pure power in their engine to be better at restarts. Most engines, especially the Mercedes engine, did not focus on the restarts and just put pure power. Allegedly, they are at 70% capacity the past 2 races. But, all things considered, Formula 1 is about innovation. It has always been about innovation. Since the start. And I think that you shouldn't curb innovation because one team has it better than the others. I don't think you should. Unless it's such a massive difference that one team flies away from the rest. Like, if you're specifically bending a rule that gives your engine or your car so much more speed than the rest, sure, curb it. Maybe not all the way, but curb it a little bit. But Ferrari doesn't have this advantage over the rest of the grid that Mercedes currently does with their engine, right? With the restarts that Ferrari are good at. They're just good at restarts through the engine. Again, they had to sacrifice pure power. Had they not worried about the race starts and just focused on pure power, they probably would be equal, if not just below Mercedes in terms of engine. And would definitely be fighting them more than like 5 to 10 laps at a time at the start of every race. But they chose the race starts because that's what they wanted to work on, and they did it to perfection. Formula 1 should not be, and itself as an entity, Formula 1 should not be curbing one engine because it does something much better than everyone else. Now, I know I complain about the Mercedes engine a lot, how it's illegal. It's not illegal. I know it's not. I just like to piss Jack off. It's really fun. But their engine circumvents the rules. As they circumvent lightly, it's within the rules. But they played around with it a little bit, but it gives them a lot more power than the rest of the field. That in turn makes their car more powerful, and they're able to just fly away, which is how they're able to still win and get 1-2s at 70% capacity. Their engine, I think, personally, shouldn't have been curbed as much as it will be in August. I'm okay that it is. That's fine. If you make that decision, that's fine. But I personally don't think an engine should be curbed that much. I think it's the way of the sport. Innovation is the sport. Think of Mercedes and the DAS system, right? The DAS was one of the most creative and coolest just engineering feats that Mercedes did. Pretty much, you have your wheel. You can pull your wheel towards you or away from you to help you corner better, and you can change it corner to corner so you can corner better. That was sick. And that got taken away so quickly because of Red Bull. And I hate that, right? I think innovation is great for F1. I think the racing product in Formula 1 is not that good. Now, this season, it's been all right. I'll give them that. But comparative to like an IMSA, a WEC, an IndyCar, a NASCAR, a rally, whatever, the racing product isn't always there. The driver's side is okay. Again, they say they have the 20 best drivers in the world. They don't. They maybe have 2 or 3 out of the best 20 drivers in the world, and that's it. But that's another conversation. But what F1 does better than every other series in the world is the innovation and engineering side of race cars. It is unbelievable how much positive engineering and manufacturing and everything has come from Formula 1. Right? It's great. And it's fun. Engineering and is just peak F1. Right? Again, I don't think Ferrari should be curbed for having a much better car than the rest at race starts, because then you would have to curb Mercedes' car for the extra engine power at full capacity. Because I don't think it's fair if you curb one engine for doing one thing better than the rest of the grid, when that engine is within the rules, but allow another engine to be much better still than the rules. I feel like you'd have to, if you do screw up with Ferrari's race starts, you would have to screw with Mercedes' current engine. And I would rather keep it the way it is and tweak minor things in the race starts than have to do that. Right? One thing that I think can maybe make a difference is instead of 5 seconds, 6-7 seconds, right? 6-7. Anyway, I'm 22 years old. That was rough. But maybe changing the couple of seconds to get the engines fired, or maybe there's maybe other things that they could do to help improve the race starts for everyone without completely botching it and like screwing up the race starts for Ferrari. But overall, it's not a big enough advantage to matter, because yes, Ferrari can easily take Mercedes on during race starts and restarts, but after like 5-ish laps, 10-ish laps, that Mercedes is going to cruise by that Ferrari every single time. So it doesn't give a big enough advantage to actually matter in the grand scheme of things. So I think they should keep it the same. Maybe, again, minor tweaks, and 6-7 seconds instead of 5. But I don't know. That's my take. I don't know. See you in the next clip. Back to Jack.
And now on to NASCAR. So this week we were at Las Vegas. And to kind of preface the first story that I have here, which is the promise of a Chastain versus Suarez boxing match. They have some beef going on. I think they've had beef. I think Daniel Suarez has clearly been very affected by his ouster from Trackhouse, by being replaced by Connor Zilic effectively. And you've seen that where he performs well and his wife is posting online of like, see, this is what happens when people pay attention to you. But I at least never realized how bad it was even at Trackhouse behind the scenes. I mean, clearly it's kind of come out of this that Chastain and Suarez never really got along. There were always kind of disagreements between the two. Suarez didn't really mesh. Maybe he just really felt disrespected constantly in the team, despite being, kind of their first guy to sign on. I mean, he was kind of the counterpart to Bubba for Trackhouse, right? Of the first guy to sign on and be part of the new team in a way. And they had a little tussle in the cars after the race at Las Vegas. They've had some incidents on track, has Suarez with the Trackhouse guys. And now they've been playing like phone tag for the time since the race, basically. Chastain and Suarez have. Ross Chastain poured his heart out in a paragraph text to Daniel Suarez. And perhaps the funniest part of all of this was they were talking about fighting, and Daniel Suarez said something along the lines of, well, Ross knows that if he tried to fight me, I would beat him easy. And, okay. Like, I no disrespect to Daniel Suarez in saying this, because he has had a long and successful career in NASCAR. He was once a really huge prospect, and he is a multi-time race winner, and he is a great racer, and by all accounts, a good guy with the fans. Ross Chastain is probably not the guy that I want to get in a pissing contest with in NASCAR in general. I mean, he is, and many times it's guys that I think that I at least was happy to see him square up with, but he's gotten in plenty of fights, whether it's fists or whether it's cars, and he's clearly not afraid to ruffle some feathers, and he's not afraid to be super aggressive, where I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys have fought before and that's happened, but I wouldn't be so confident. Ross might not be the biggest guy, but he's got a lot of fight in him. And he's not afraid to bring that out. Speaking of bringing things out, Carson Hocevar, Daniel Suarez's teammate at Spire, is going to be running a Dale Earnhardt throwback scheme at Darlington this weekend. Now, this kind of stems from the fact that Hocevar's racing style has been kind of lightheartedly compared to Dale's. It's the aggression in much the same way Chastain was, especially a little earlier in his career. And these style comparisons, obviously it's not a talent comparison, right? They're style comparisons that are endorsed even by like Junior. But that's what Darlington the weekend is all about. This is no longer the official throwback race, but it's still Darlington, and they're still going to run throwbacks. And Carson Hocevar running a very pretty Dale throwback, cringy Chili's marketing stuff aside, like riding the Dente Agente or whatever they said on the little poster they put out with it. It's a neat throwback. It's a good throwback scheme, and I am all for good throwbacks to continue. I think that it's been criminal, especially it feels like in some recent years, when teams do throwbacks towards the end of when it was officially a throwback weekend. The teams, because of sponsor requirements mostly, they really half did it. Where because the sponsor had certain requirements about their brand, they didn't want to like perfectly mimic a scheme from another brand. And so you had a lot of throwbacks where you really had to squint. And here, this is a pretty good one. And I am happy about it. Happy to see Hocevar run well in it. And hey, maybe he'll lead some laps. Maybe he'll pull off something fun this weekend. Unfortunately, Alex Bowman will not be pulling off something fun this weekend, more than likely, because he is still out with Vertigo. And he will be out for at least 3 more races. Justin Allgaier will continue to fill in for the next 3 races in the 48 car, while Kyle Larson is filling his spot in the 88 car, which he was supposed to be racing at Darlington this week. Now, I don't have much more to say because we've already talked about this a couple times with Alex Bowman. But it's really just prayers up for him, really hoping that he gets better, or that this is something that can get better. Obviously, that's not a sure thing when it comes to Vertigo. Like, there are a lot of people that they wake up with it one day and that's that. And it's really heartbreaking for a very talented guy that's often gotten the short end of the stick at Hendrick, but it's still carved out a very respectable career. We've talked a lot about that older athletic top 75 drivers list, which I believe Bowman was the last guy to make it on. Like, this is an accomplished racer that still has a lot in the tank, and it would be really heartbreaking to see his career ended at the snap of a finger, at something that can just happen when you wake up one day. It's really tough to see, and I for one am really hoping that he pulls through and comes back, even if it's not for this year, for next year, because he really is. He's a good racer. and seems like a good dude.
Hi. One more quick story before I send it back to Jack to do race predictions and recaps. Daniel Dye, a truck driver for Colleague, was suspended yesterday indefinitely for NASCAR and Colleague after making insensitive comments towards IndyCar driver David Malukas. It was said in a tweet by Bob Pockrass that he made inferences on the sexuality of another man in a tone mocking gay men. Dye will have to undergo sensitivity training. Here's the video now.
I don't know what he raced or anything. We did some like St. Pete promo stuff, and he was at it. And I thought he was one of like the Indy Next guys or like a Miata guy or something. I really didn't know.
Sorry, Emma. He plays for the other team, I think.
And I was like, so what do you, I was like, do y'all race any ovals? And he was like, distraught that I asked him that question. Like, yeah, we raced Nashville and Iowa. I'm like, okay. I didn't know Miatas went to Nashville. He's like, why don't you eat your food? He's like, oh my gosh, yes. We raced Indianapolis too. I love Indianapolis. And Roger Penske. I love Roger. Love you, Roger. As soon as I start doing a David Malukas gay voice, I hit a gold. So let's keep it going. We're just gonna keep talking like this till I miss a gold. I'm on fire.
And yeah, it is very insensitive. I think suspending him is the right move. I don't get where it's coming from. When you do that, I just don't know why you do that. Here's Daniel Dye's apology, and in it, he says, I have some close friends in the LGBTQ plus community who I would never want to feel less of themselves because of what I said. Yada, yada, yada. That's the same vibes as a white guy, again, Daniel Dye's white, but another white guy or Daniel Dye saying something extremely racist and then backing it up by saying, I have black friends. It still doesn't make what you said okay. You shouldn't have said it. If you have those friends who are in the LGBTQ, you shouldn't be you shouldn't be using a tone to mock them. Like, I don't get how you're that stupid to do that, but he did it. And the rule that Daniel Dye broke is NASCAR members shall not make or cause to be made a public statement or communication that criticizes, ridicules, or otherwise disparages another person based upon that person's race, color, creed, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, marital status, religion, age, or handicapping condition. Let's just hope that NASCAR doesn't continue the precedent of rewarding shitty people with rides like they did with Kyle Larson and Noah Gragson. If you don't know what they did, Larson said the N-word on a live stream during COVID days and lost his seat at Chip Ganassi and then instantly got a seat at Hendricks afterward. And Noah Gragson liked a couple of racist tweets and social media posts, and then I think he also might have said the N-word, but don't quote me on that because I don't actually know if he did. But I know he did at least like and retweet and repost some racist posts. He got suspended. He came back. He instantly got a seat. So let's hope that precedent isn't set and Daniel Dye is not picked back up immediately. Let's hope. Because insensitive shit has no place in this world. But anyway, back to Jack.
Now, for the race itself, Alex finally got a prediction right. He said finally, those are his words, I'd like to be clear, because I am the last one to rag on Alex for his picks, because he usually runs circles around me in this. But he picked Denny, and Denny won in resounding fashion in the Cup race. The Toyotas in general were fast all day, had real speed, but they kind of kept shooting themselves in the foot. But Denny didn't care what happened to him. He just kept driving up. Like, he dominant to a level that it's hard to explain. I mean, he had basically the kind of speed that Blaney had last week around in Phoenix. And that put Denny at 10th all time in wins in NASCAR, passing Kevin Harvick. Denny is the 5th driver to win in 20 different seasons, joining Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon, and Bobby Allison, which is definitely a list of names that you want to be a part of if you're a racer. Obviously, Denny doesn't have a championship to his name, but he has basically every other accolade you could think of in the book. I mean, he is one of the great drivers of all time. He has done a lot of good for the sport, even if he's played the villain for much of his career. I mean, even if you look at this offseason and the lawsuit with 2311 involved and Denny as a team owner becoming a very public figure for that lawsuit, them settling, them improving the situation for the teams and hopefully coming together to improve the sport moving forward is really I don't want to say selfless, because obviously they got money from it, but the act of bringing and carrying out that lawsuit really shows that this is a guy that not only is one of the great drivers, but is a guy that cares about bettering the sport. That even if the other teams signed on, they recognized that the teams were getting a raw deal and it would be hard for the sport to sustain itself moving forward, and they worked to correct that. And the fans are coming around on Denny too. I mean, this is, yet again, he won and the crowd liked him. He didn't get roundly booed. He was not roundly treated as the villain in the way that he has been for much of his career. And it's nice to see that kind of turnaround on him, that as one of the greats, despite not having a championship to his name, maybe yet, Alex still says Denny's going to win the chip, but he deserves the respect that he's starting to get and the admiration that he's starting to get in a lot of ways. Now, on a completely separate note, Hendrick Motorsports had a really nice comeback race here. They have had a rough start to the year in a lot of ways, and they really needed something to go their way here. And so to finish second and third with Elliott and Byron, Larson finished seventh, still made it in the top 10. Justin Allgaier finished down in the 20s. I mean, but also he's a fill-in driver. So I'm not going to hold that against him too much, although obviously you'd hope for more going forward for, a championship caliber O'Reilly Series driver. But still, there's a reason that Allgaier hasn't exactly gotten a full-time Cup gig. Hendrick needed a race like that. They needed to show some speed. A cookie-cutter track where Larson has been historically very dominant is a great place to do it, and they really had a good showing all around. Them and the Toyotas were just really having a great day. And I say the Toyotas because Bubba finished 9th, Tyler Reddick finished 13th. But really, JGR had 3 cars in the top 5, Chase Briscoe finishing 8th. JGR masterclass, but 2311 was kind of right there with them. Going down to the O'Reilly Series, and speaking of Kyle Larson being dominant at Las Vegas, this was maybe one of the more obvious Larson dominant wins that we've seen, and somehow I managed to talk Alex out of picking Kyle Larson, so I apologize for that, Alex, but Kyle Larson won. The Cup guys in general had some really great showings. Chase Briscoe finished in 2nd. Connor Zilich was 7th. He was really showing that kind of speed that he had in Xfinity last year in this O'Reilly race, where he's had a really rough start to the Cup Series in comparison. Really just a solid day for the Cup guys. I mean, Cole Custer might have finished down in 18th, but he was still having some strong runs. It was one of those races that almost started to remind you of old school bushwhacking, which maybe we'll get a little more of with the increased cap on the number of races that these guys can do. But I don't know. Good for Larson. Sheldon Creed was in the mix, leading a single lap. Allgaier led more laps than Larson did, ended up finishing 4th. Yeah, not a whole lot else to say there. And Larson was really dominant. I know toward the end of the race, Jeremy Clements made a great save where, clap it up for him. Keeping the race green, not causing some NASCAR style BS to happen toward the end there. So good on him. Alex picked Hamlin for the Cup race. Obviously he won. Sawalich did not, in fact, win the O'Reilly race. I picked Reddick and Allgaier. Neither of them won. So on to Darlington. Alex is going with Denny Hamlin yet again in the Cup race, presumably because Denny is one of the best racers in NASCAR. Just, broke into the top 10 all time and won't stop anytime soon, it feels like. He's picking Raja for the O'Reilly race, which is a solid pick, and Lane Riggs for the truck race. Now, I for my part, I will be picking Bubba Wallace for the Cup race, who has had some very strong showings all in a row at Darlington, but who also has had really good speed this year in general. He has been really one of the faster drivers all year. His lowest finish is still 11th place, even now that we've gone to Phoenix and we've gone to Las Vegas, which are kind of more normal tracks. But really, the 11th place at COTA, he struggles the most at those road courses. And I have Austin Hill for the O'Reilly race, which does cause me pain to say. And I even wrote next to my pick that I'm sorry for making it, but Austin Hill has one of the highest average finishes at Darlington in the O'Reilly series of anyone. And if picking Allgaier isn't going to work out for me, I might as well change it up and pick Hill, who I think even has a better average finish than Allgaier at this track. Which, there's a... Yeah, I don't know how much more to it there is. It's not like I'm backing up Austin Hill as a guy here. So, and then in the Cup Series, I am going to go with Carson Hocevar, who's driving in the 77 Spire Motorsports Chevrolet. He, Ross Chastain, and Christopher Bell are all Cup guys going down into the Truck Series. Corey LaJoie is also racing in the Truck Series. But Carson Hocevar in a truck, man, even if he doesn't win all the time, he's something special, it feels like. He's a bad, fast racer in basically anything he's in. And I just, of anyone to pick, especially with Alex already picking Lane Riggs, I'll go with Hocevar. Why not?
Hello, me again. I just want to give a quick update on our NASCAR predictions currently, like what we got wrong and right so far this season. In the Cup, I've gotten 1 right, 5 wrong. In the O'Reilly Series, I've gotten 0 right, 5 wrong. And in the Truck Series, I've gotten 0 right, 3 wrong. In the Cup Series, Jack has got 1 right, 5 wrong, so we're equal. He's gotten 2 right, 3 wrong in the O'Reilly Series, and 1 right, 2 wrong in the Trucks. So out of the two of us, he's the only one that has at least 1 in all 3 series. I'm a shell of my former self. I was really good at this last year. I'm no longer good anymore, but it is what it is. We'll figure it out. And yeah, that's your update for that. Back to Jack.
For a brief bit of IMSA news, JDC Miller Motorsports is bringing a historic livery back to the 12 Hours of Sebring on their Porsche 963. They are showing a new version of their 2021 12 Hours winning livery. And they're also running the number 5 as they did when they won in 2021. So they're paying tribute, but with a bit of a twist, which is a great note to look forward to the 12 Hours of Sebring. Which is this weekend at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, March 21st. Obviously runs 12 hours. I don't think you needed me to tell you that. Qualifying is the day before on Friday, the 20th, earlier in the day. But make sure to check that out. I mean, the 24 Hours of Daytona might have been interrupted by fog, might have had some tough moments, but IMSA always puts on a great show. Maybe not for full 12 hours worth. I think that sleep is important, but definitely check out the IMSA race and see this beautiful livery on track. Now in WEC, for other endurance racing news, the Qatar race has been pushed back to October, which obviously had to happen with the state of the world right now, and their season instead opening at Imola. So, get to look forward to that in October if that ends up happening. MotoGP is also moving their Qatar Grand Prix, which is also due to the current state of the world. It was originally scheduled for mid-April, and it is most likely going to be pushed back to probably early November, where it would be capping off a triple header in Australia, then Malaysia, then Qatar. And, yeah, I mean, again, look forward to that. Who knows if those races will end up happening, if things will start to clear themselves up. But, I think that they got to do what they got to do. For the IndyCar driver spotlight for this week, we're focusing on Kyle Kirkwood, who went from 7th to 1st. He led 16 laps in the race. Most importantly, coming home with the win, he now leads the driver standings for the first time in his career. Now, he is, especially in the last couple of years, really come on strong. Last year, he felt like the closest / most serious challenger to Alex Palou, especially early in the season. And this is a big step for him. I'm still not convinced that Palou won't figure it out and kind of come back, but Kirkwood leading the standings, someone not named Alex Palou coming up to lead the standings at this stage of the season, still is worth noting the way that the last few years have played out. And finally, F1 Academy also raced this weekend in China. As far as the main feature race, I just got to say this was one of the weekends that really reminds you that, yes, this is an F4 series. We had some spectacular lowlights, if you will. Alba Larson bottled it from the lead on a safety car restart, which was really a brutal way for her race to end after a pretty impressive race up to that point. Alicia Palmowski has had a disappointing start to the year, even if she has strong raw pace. She really just, in the race, has started to struggle. And Felbermeyer came home with the win. I mean, it was earned in the sense that others that started ahead of her or were racing ahead of her made mistakes, and she had a clean race. And that is a really important skill to develop down in these kind of feeder series, is to race clean and race fast and not make high-profile mistakes. I think the broadcast this time around did a really good job of highlighting what F1 Academy is about beyond just the drivers, that it is a series overall trying to promote the participation of women in motorsport, whether that's engineers, whether that's other team members, and obviously the drivers, and spotlighting how there are people that work on the teams or worked on the teams that have ended up in other roles, and how it's been a success from that standpoint, even if, maybe the best success story from a driver standpoint might be Abby Pulling still working her way up. And, a couple of other drivers here and there, maybe testing in Formula E and the like. As far as upcoming races go, we've got a lot this weekend. MotoGP has a sprint on Saturday, a race on Monday. Moto2 and Moto3 both also race on Sunday. Obviously, the IMSA 12 Hours of Sebring we talked about is Saturday. Actually, is my... I think that I totally gave you misinformation before because my calendar widget lied to me. Okay, yeah, the 12 Hours of Sebring starts at 10 a.m. on Peacock. For some reason, the IMSA calendar widget only includes the time it's on NBC Sports Network from 5 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. So I apologize for getting the start of that wrong beforehand. But you can watch Peacock the whole duration of the race. You can watch on IMSA TV or YouTube elsewhere. Although in the United States, you can only stream it on Peacock. And then from 5 to 10:30, you can watch it on NBC Sports Network as the race comes to its conclusion. Now, NASCAR. All three series are racing at Darlington. Already gave you the picks. We got trucks on Friday, O'Reilly on Saturday, Cup on Sunday. The standard deal. And with that, that brings this solo episode of Apex to Oval to a close. Next week, I'll have Alex next to me. I don't know whether he's going to be there or he's going to be there, maybe here, maybe even there. I do know that he is still going to be editing this, so maybe editor Alex can add some pizzazz right around now. Maybe give a little hello, give some final thoughts. For my part, the only final thought I have is that Kimi Antonelli is good at driving a race car. And with that, goodbye.